Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. West Films friends, in today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is called Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I'm also going to give you all the information on which OTT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-P-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film storyline, star cast, actors, performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so let's start the video. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is a 2025 American action spy film directed by Christopher McQuarrie from a screenplay he co-wrote with Erik Jendresen. The sequel to Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1, 2023, it is the 8th and final installment in the Mission Impossible film series. Tom Cruise, who also produced alongside McQuarrie, Hayley Atwell, Ving Rhames, Simon Pegg, Henry Czerny, and Angela Bassett reprise their roles from the previous films. In the film, Impossible Mission Force agent Ethan Hunt Cruise and his team unite to prevent the rogue AI known as the Entity from unleashing global destruction against humanity. In January 2019, Cruise announced that the 7th and 8th Mission Impossible films would be shot back-to-back with McQuarrie co-writing and directing both films. Plans for the 8th film later changed in February 2021. Returning and new cast members were announced soon after, including Lorne Balfe, who composed the score for 2 other films in the franchise, returning to score Final Reckoning, although Balfe later left the production and was replaced by his longtime collaborators Max Arouge and Alfie Godfrey. Filming began in March 2022 in the United Kingdom, with other filming locations including Malta, South Africa, and Norway. Production was halted in July 2023 due to the SAG-AFTRA strike, resumed in March 2024, and concluded in November 2024. The film, originally titled Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 2, dropped its subtitle in October 2023, and the new subtitle was announced in November 2024. With an estimated budget of $300–400 million, it is one of the most expensive films ever made. The Final Reckoning had its world premiere in Tokyo on May 5, 2025, was screened out of competition at the 78th Cannes Film Festival on May 14th, and was theatrically released in the United States on May 23rd by Paramount Pictures. The film received positive reviews from critics and has grossed $204 million worldwide, becoming the 9th highest-grossing film of 2025. In addition to having the largest opening weekend in the franchise. Plot: 2 months after retrieving the key to the source code for the malevolent artificial intelligence known as the Entity, Impossible Missions Force agents Ethan Hunt and Grace pursue Gabriel, once the Entity's main human proxy. Instead, Gabriel captures them, reveals that the Entity has abandoned him for failing to keep the key from them, and coerces Ethan into retrieving the core module, revealed to be the Rabbit's Foot, from the sunken Russian submarine Sevastopol, which would give Gabriel control over the Entity's source code. Ethan and Grace escape with the aid of IMF agent Benji Dunn and recruit Paris, Gabriel's erstwhile lieutenant, and Theo Dega, a CIA agent previously tasked with apprehending Ethan. They discover a device that Gabriel used to communicate with the Entity, which shows Ethan a vision of a coming nuclear apocalypse. Ethan realizes the Entity needs access to a secure digital bunker in South Africa to ensure its physical survival. Ethan sends his team to retrieve the Sevastopol's coordinates, while he rejoins Luther Stickle to disarm a nuclear device Gabriel planted in London. Luther reveals that he developed malware for the Entity loaded on a hard drive, the Poison Pill, but Gabriel has stolen it. Luther sacrifices himself to disarm the bomb by preemptively triggering one of its conventional explosive detonators. Ethan then surrenders and is brought to Mount Weather, where U.S. President Erik urges cooperation due to the entity's escalating control over global nuclear systems. With only 4 days before it launches global strikes and relocates to the bunker, Ethan convinces Sloan to let him act independently to locate the Sevastopol, against CIA Director Eugene Kittredge's objections. While Ethan joins the aircraft carrier USS George H.W. Bush in the North Pacific Ocean to dive to the Sevastopol wreck, his team travels to St. Matthew Island in the Bering Sea, home to a Cold War-era sonar array that detected the Sevastopol's sinking. They locate former CIA analyst William Donlow, who was exiled to the island decades earlier after a break-in at CIA headquarters. Donlow reveals he memorized the Sevastopol's coordinates after recognizing the sonar signature. As Grace and Donlow's wife Tepisa hold off an occupying unit of Russian special forces in a firefight, Donlow transmits the coordinates to Ethan and the team. Ethan receives the coordinates, dives to the Sevastopol, and retrieves the Podkova module, but accidentally causes the wreck to slide down the continental shelf. Narrowly escaping without his air supply, Ethan drowns during the ascent, but is rescued and revived from decompression sickness by Grace and Tepisa using a portable decompression chamber. Reunited with the IMF team, Ethan outlines his plan to plug the poison pill into the Podkova, fooling the entity into downloading itself onto a physical drive and isolating itself from the outside world. Ethan suspects Gabriel is already waiting at the South African bunker with the poison pill, aiming to seize control of the entity by forcing Ethan to surrender the module. The team arrives at the bunker in South Africa only to find it abandoned, save for Gabriel and his allies. He reveals another timed nuclear device and demands the module. Ethan agrees, predicting that Gabriel will plug the poison pill into the Podkova, but the handover is interrupted by Kittredge, who wants the U.S. to control the entity. The bomb is activated in the ensuing firefight, and Gabriel flees, knowing that Ethan will pursue him. Paris performs emergency surgery on a critically injured Benji as he guides Grace through the process of rebooting the bunker systems to trap the entity. Like Luther, Donlow preempts the explosion by setting off a detonator first, but buys enough time for everyone to get to safety beforehand. As the entity gains total control of the world's nuclear weapons and prepares to move to the bunker, Ethan chases Gabriel in a biplane and climbs onto Gabriel's plane mid-air. Gabriel is thrown from the cockpit and attempts to activate his parachute, but his skull is split open by the rudder. Ethan finds a second parachute, escapes with the poison pill, and plugs it into the module, allowing Grace to finish the download within a tenth of a second before all nuclear weapons are launched. Kittredge and Degas' superior, Jasper Briggs, finds Ethan. Kittredge is frustrated when Ethan hands over the destroyed module of the Sevastopol, while Jasper, in reality Jim Phelps Jr., the son of Ethan's original team leader Jim Phelps, makes peace with Ethan for exposing his father as a traitor and killing him. The IMF team reunites in London, where Grace gives Ethan the drive housing the entity, and the team members go their separate ways. Production. Development. On January 14, 2019, Tom Cruise announced that the 7th and 8th Mission Impossible films would be shot back-to-back, with Christopher McQuarrie writing and directing both films for July 23, 2021 and August 5, 2022 releases. However, in February 2021, Deadline Hollywood revealed that Paramount had decided to no longer move forward with that plan. Casting. In September 2019, Hayley Atwell and Pom Klementif joined the cast of the 8th installment. In December, Simon Pegg confirmed his return for the film, while Shay Wyam was also cast. Nicholas Hoult joined the cast by January 2020, along with Henry Czerny, who reprised his role as Eugene Kittredge from Dead Reckoning Part 1 in the first film. However, due to scheduling conflicts, Hoult was replaced by Esai Morales for both films. Vanessa Kirby, who first appeared in Fallout, announced she was returning for both films, but did not appear in Final Reckoning. In July 2022, it was reported that Holt McCallany had joined the cast. In August, it was revealed Nick Offerman and Janet McTeer were also added to the cast. In March 2023, McQuarrie announced Hannah Waddingham, Lucy Tuligarjuk, and Rolf Saxon's addition to the cast, the latter of whom reprises his role from the first film. In March and April 2024, respectively, Katie O'Brien and Tremel Tillman joined the cast in then undisclosed roles. In November 2024, it was revealed that Angela Bassett would reprise her role as CIA Director Erica Sloan. Filming. In February 2021, Deadline Hollywood reported that the film would no longer be filmed back-to-back with Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. By November, McQuarrie was in the process of rewriting the film's script. On March 23, 2022, The Hollywood Reporter reported the beginning of principal photography of the then untitled Mission Impossible 8. Filming took place in the UK at Longcross Studios and the Lake District. Other locations included Malta, South Africa, and Norway. In December 2022, filming was finished in the UK. The crew then moved to Apulia in Italy to continue filming aboard the aircraft carrier USS George H.W. Bush. During the 2023 Writers Guild of America strike, production was thought to have been put on hold according to an interview with McQuarrie in the June 2023 issue of the Empire magazine. However, this was later revealed to have been a misinterpretation of McQuarrie's statement, and continued production was only waiting for the promotion of Part 1 to complete. Filming was officially suspended in July due to the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike. The film returned to production in March 2024, though in May it encountered a delay due to a submarine malfunction. During filming in England, Cruz and Morales were observed performing stunts from an airborne biplane, with Cruz holding on to the wings of the open cockpit aircraft as it flew upside down, while the pilot wore a green screen suit so as to be digitally removed from the final shot. In July 2024, Simon Pegg revealed filming had concluded for his part, though the cast and crew were maintaining radio silence. By November 2024, production had concluded and the film was in post-production. The Hollywood Reporter reported that the budget had neared $400 million due to the production delays. Post-production. Industrial Light and Magic returns from the seventh film to produce the visual effects, with Clear Angle Studios and Halon Entertainment as the additional vendors for LiDAR, cyber scanning, and pre-visualization. In October 2023, Dead Reckoning Part 2 was removed as the film's subtitle, and the new subtitle was confirmed as The Final Reckoning in November 2024. Music. Lorne Balfe was originally announced in May 2020 to be composing the film's score after previously doing so for Mission Impossible Fallout 2018 and Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 2023, but it was later announced in April 2025 that he would be replaced with Max Arouge and Alfie Godfrey. Arouge has previously provided additional music for Dead Reckoning and served as technical score assistant on Fallout. Both Arouge and Godfrey have contributed music to numerous projects scored by Balfe over the years. Cecile Tournesac was credited as the supervising music editor and score producer. The full album was released on the 22nd of May 2025. Release. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning had its world premiere in Tokyo on May 5, 2025. The film screened at the 2025 Cannes Film Festival on May 14, 2025, prior to its scheduled theatrical release on May 23rd by Paramount Pictures. It was previously set for release on August 5, 2022, but was delayed to November 4, 2022, July 7, 2023, June 28, 2024, and then to the current date in response to the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike, taking the original release date of the SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants. Due to delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and the 2023 Hollywood strikes, the budget for the film reportedly increased to at least $400 million, placing it among the most expensive films ever made. Based on typical industry expectations, the film may need to earn around $1 billion worldwide to recoup its production costs. However, in addition to its box office, its performance on Paramount's streaming service, Paramount Plus, is also expected to be a significant factor in evaluating its overall success. Internationally, it was released theatrically in Australia, New Zealand, Philippines, India, and South Korea on May 17, 2025, before releasing in the United Kingdom on May 21st. The film was released in standard 4DX and IMAX formats. Reception. Box office. As of May 26, 2025, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning has grossed $77.5 million in the United States and Canada and $127 million in other territories for a worldwide total of $204.5 million. In the United States and Canada, The Final Reckoning was released alongside Lilo & Stitch and was initially projected to gross $80 to $110 million over the 4-day Memorial Day weekend. Final Reckoning earned $24.8 million on its opening day, which included $8.3 million from Thursday night previews, setting a new opening day record for the franchise. The film debuted to $64 million over its standard 3-day weekend and reached $77.5 million across the 4-day Memorial Day weekend, placing second behind Disney's Lilo & Stitch. Despite not topping the box office, it contributed to the biggest Memorial Day weekend in domestic box office history, with all films combining for a record-breaking $333 million. Critical response. Reviews of The Final Reckoning were generally positive, but subdued compared to previous installments. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 80% of 315 critics' reviews are positive. The website's consensus reads, "Gargantuan in action, runtime, and scope, The Final Reckoning is a sentimental send-off for Ethan Hunt that accomplishes its mission with a characteristic flair for the impossible." 6. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 67 out of 100, based on 56 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of to F scale, while those surveyed by PostTrack gave it an 89% overall positive score, with 79% saying they would definitely recommend the film. Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian rated the film 5 stars out of 5, calling it a wildly silly, wildly entertaining adventure which periodically gives us a greatest hits flashback montage of the other 7 films. In another positive review, Michael Phillips of the Chicago Tribune said the film was a satisfying capper to an 8-film franchise and concluded, "He may not hang off a biplane, but the year's unlikeliest franchise MVP makes Final Reckoning something better than superhuman. Human." Robbie Collin of the Daily Telegraph said, "Even by the series' own now well-established standards, this widely presumed last entry in Tom Cruise's Mission Impossible franchise is an awe-inspiringly bananas piece of work." Ann Hornaday of the Washington Post gave the film 3 out of 4 stars, saying it stays true to the franchise's core tenets even if it too often feels baggy and redundant, and particularly praised a callback from the first film that strikes a particularly winning chord of humor and sentimentality. In an unfavorable review, Brian Tallarico of RogerEbert.com was more critical of the film, calling the first hour unwieldy and truly clunky, and the worst segment in the entire franchise. Although he noted that the action sequences during the film's peaks were enough to ignore everything wrong with the movie up to that point. Carrie Darling of the Houston Chronicle described the film as a disappointing installment that felt bloated and tired, despite the dizzying, high-flying stunt work at the film's climax. He also criticized its runtime, stating, "Just shy of 3 hours, the longest in the series, it takes a heck of a long time to achieve liftoff." Future. In June 2023, McQuarrie told Fandango that Dead Reckoning and The Final Reckoning would not necessarily end the series, and they were developing ideas for future installments. In July 2023, during promotion for Dead Reckoning, Cruise expressed interest in continuing to make further films in the series as Ethan Hunt, despite both films having initially been billed as a send-off to the character, citing Harrison Ford playing Indiana Jones in his early 80s in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. On November 12, 2024, the journalist Jeff Snyder reported that Cruise was looking at his Top Gun Maverick co-star Glenn Powell to replace him as the new lead. Powell denied this rumor on the Pat McAfee show. In May 2025, during the New York premiere for this film, Cruise told The Hollywood Reporter that this film is the last one in the franchise, adding that the film isn't called The Final Reckoning for no reason. Mission: Impossible: The Final Reckoning Review. Here it is, the 8th and final film for now in the spectacular Mission Impossible action thriller franchise, which manifests itself like the last segment jettisoned from some impossibly futurist Apollo spacecraft, which then carries on ionospherically upwards in a fireball as Tom Cruise ascends to a state beyond stardom, beyond IP. And with this film's anti-AI and internet-septic message and the gobsmacking final aerial set piece, Cruise is repeating his demand for the echt big screen experience. He is, of course, doing his own superhuman stunts, for the same reason as he himself once memorably put it that Gene Kelly did all his own dancing. Final Reckoning is a new and ultimate challenge. Actually, the second half of the challenge from the previous film, which takes Cruise's buff and resourceful IMF leader Ethan Hunt on one last maverick, deniable mission to exasperate and yet overawe his stuffed shirt superiors at Washington and Langley. And what might that be? To save the world, of course, like all the other missions. With his doughty team, including Grace, Hayley Atwell, Luther, Ving Rhames, and Benji, Simon Pegg, Hunt must now confront a sinister and metastasizing AI brain called the Entity, the ultimate MacGuffin/baddie, which is undermining truth all over the world with lies and deepfakes, setting nation against nation, nuclear power against nuclear power, so that it will be the anti-God, the evil ruler of all. And to stop it, Ethan has to take the low-tech cruciform key he salvaged in the last film and apply it to the Podkova device which is on board a wrecked Russian sub, the Sevastopol, somewhere on the seabed. Wait, should they actually have called in James Cameron in some sort of nifty submersible? The combination of the two will be a poison pill which will destroy the Entity. It is a wildly silly, wildly entertaining adventure which periodically gives us a greatest hits flashback montage of the other 7 films in the MI canon, but we still get a brand new box-fresh Tom sprinting along the street scene, without which it wouldn't be MI. Moreover, this 8th film gives us a terrific new character, U.S. Sub-Commander Cap Bledsoe, played with suavity and the tiniest hint of camp by Tramell Tillman from TV's Severance, who has the chops for MI9 whenever that happens. And just as it wouldn't be MY without a sprinting scene, it wouldn't be MY without Tom hanging on for dear life at some unfeasible altitude. Here he gets to cling to the wing of an old-fashioned prop plane in the Blue Empyrean. As Anthony Hopkins put it way back in My 2, it's not mission difficult, is it? It is at this point that I realize that Tom Cruise isn't exactly Gene Kelly so much as superhuman action hero Harold Lloyd, hanging from the clock in Safety Last in 1923, dangling from the minute hand, preventing it from mounting towards 12, defying gravity and holding back time. That is what Cruise has done. Forever young, forever fit, never saying die in the face of this preposterous Armageddon clock. Leading into one of the best scenes in Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt turns a wheel on a submarine and the aspect ratio of the film expands from widescreen to fill the IMAX screen. It's a wonderfully clever beat. After all, Tom Cruise is credited with saving the movie-going experience with Top Gun Maverick, so it makes sense that even in character, he's controlling the image around him. Sadly, it's one of the few clever beats in Final Reckoning, a movie that forgets so much of what makes this franchise memorable in an unwieldy and truly clunky first hour that plays like the longest previously on you've ever seen. Repetitive and pretentious to the point of parody, it's the worst segment in the entire franchise. That the film recovers as much as it does might be the most impressive mission that Ethan Hunt has ever proven possible. To be fair, if anyone has earned valorization in the action franchise sphere, it's Hunt. And so the first act serves not only to remind people of where we left these characters in 2023's Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, but to underline the importance of this character in the last 3 decades of genre filmmaking. Director Christopher McQuarrie, who co-wrote with Erik Jendresen, treats Final Reckoning like the endgame of this series from the very beginning, recapping not only the last film but all 7 previous outings, turning Hunt into a mythical figure more than ever before. Ethan Hunt isn't a superhero. He's the guy who gets the job done, the one who chooses to accept the assignment, and the mythologizing right from jump in Final Reckoning feels a bit overcooked. Even if we all agree that Hunt crews have earned this victory lap, did they have to take 12 of them? The MI films have so commonly opened with explosive sequences in their first acts, from blowing up the Kremlin to hanging from a plane to even the fun infiltration of the last chapter, that it's truly impactful to not have that sense of a runaway train building steam to start this one. It's stuck at the station for an incredibly long time. As it's waiting to get going, Hunt is in hiding, brought back in by President Sloan, a wonderful Angela Bassett, giving the film gravitas instead of just pretension, to stop the impending doom that is the Entity, a rogue AI that now threatens the entire world with nuclear annihilation. All of the players from the last film are back, including Hunt's allies Luther, Ving Rhames, Benji, Simon Pegg, and Grace, Hayley Atwell, joined this time by Paris, Pom Clemente, what's so excellent in the moments she's given to shine that one wishes she could pick up the Hunt mantle and continue the series. And, quickly enough, Degas, Greg Tarzan Davis. Asai Morales resurfaces as the villain Gabriel, a human stand-in for the AI villain of the Reckoning films, and a cadre of familiar faces pop up to fret over whether or not Ethan will save the day, including Janet McTeer, Holt McCallany, and Nick Offerman. Proving the reach of Apple TV's original programming hits, Ted Lasso's Hannah Waddingham works in an effective supporting role as an admiral on an aircraft carrier, and Severance, Trammell Tillman, is fantastic in a fun part as a submarine commander. It's a big cast, and I haven't even mentioned a few familiar faces that shouldn't be spoiled, for what is essentially a narratively simple movie, especially at 170 minutes. Ethan Hunt and his mystery machine of allies need to stop Gabriel and the Entity from destroying mankind. That's it. The relatively shallow plotting allows for McQuarrie and Jendresen to fill in with two things: way too much planning and, eventually, some truly spectacular action sequences. Although, I would argue that the previous films had a much stronger sense of humor that could count as a third thing, missing from this entry. One of the joys of this series has been a sort of "can you believe we're doing this" aesthetic, as they pushed the last movie star to greater extremes just to satisfy a ticket-buying audience. In between dropping Tom Cruise out of planes and hurling him off cliffs, there was a cheeky wink to the audience. We know this is ridiculous. You know this is ridiculous, but just make sure to keep your hands inside the car as the roller coaster picks up speed while we put your favorite star in mortal jeopardy. By taking itself so seriously, Final Reckoning loses the cheeky ingredient in the recipe. It's less fun, and that's truly disappointing for a series that has given us some of the most exhilarating set pieces in action history. Of course, McQuarrie and Cruise aren't going to fumble the ball once the action game plan in motion. Without spoiling, the two best extended sequences here take place deep underwater and high in the air. It's as if Cruise and his team of brilliant stunt choreographers ran out of ideas on dry land. Especially in IMAX, the action in Final Reckoning can be truly breathtaking, a hybrid of Ian Fleming and Buster Keaton. Action choreography that somehow frames its hero as the bravest man on Earth, and also sometimes just the stubbornest. When Hunt is climbing around an airborne plane, you can feel the gravity pulling him to Earth and the wind pushing against him. It's enough to ignore everything wrong with the movie up to that point, and especially in an era of rampantly soulless CGI, I wouldn't begrudge anyone for dismissing the valleys of this movie just to embrace the undeniable peaks. It would be easier for me, an unabashedly huge fan of the franchise on this very site, to do the same if it weren't so easy to see how those valleys were formed and how easily they could have been avoided. It's clear that Cruise and McQuarrie came into this project with a desire to make the biggest film in the franchise. The runtime and franchise recapping reflect that. And it's also worth noting that it was once called Dead Reckoning, Part 2. And so that aggressive self-seriousness that drains the first hour of this film can be partially blamed on it really being the middle hour of a 5-hour experience. However, all of that throat-clearing and philosophizing actually makes Final Reckoning feel less confident, not more. We don't need to be told how important Tom Cruise is to moviegoing to enjoy his final mission. After all, he turns the wheel. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning has been revealed to members of the press, and first reactions are praising the film as an exhilarating end to the historic action franchise. Film critic Courtney Howard wrote of the film on X, "Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning rips. Loved it. An exhilarating adrenaline rush for the head and heart, an immersive, awe-inducing stuntacular of the highest order. McQuarrie, Tom Cruise, and CO have crafted the gold standard, a brilliant, bold actioner for the ages. See it big and loud." Journalist and BAFTA member Simon Thompson echoed Howard's glowing review, writing on social media, "Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is whip-smart and razor-sharp. This tense eighth entry in one of the most exhilarating franchises of all time is another winner. With sphincter-tightening set pieces, blockbusters do not get much better than this. Cruise and McQuarrie nail it." Off-Screen Central's founder and editor-in-chief, Kenzie Vanunu, praised the film with a small caveat. She wrote, "Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is a summer spectacle with non-stop adrenaline and me asking if Tom Cruise is okay the entire movie. There's a bit too much going on at all times, but still a good time at the movies." After 7 installments across 28 years, Mission Impossible 8 brings Cruise's iconic espionage franchise to a close, at least for the time being. Picking up 2 months after the events of 2023's Dead Reckoning, the film follows super spy Ethan Hunt as he continues his mission to destroy an all-powerful AI known as the Entity before it falls into the wrong hands. Other cast members include Hayley Atwell, Hannah Waddingham, Pom Clementif, Nick Offerman, Shay Wyam, Simon Pegg, Katie O'Brien, Angela Bassett, Ving Rhames, and Essa Morales. After tonight's press premiere, MI8 heads to the Cannes Film Festival to screen out of competition on May 14th. Cruise and writer-director Christopher McQuarrie will both be in attendance. The splashy world debut will mark Cruise's third time at the festival, with his first as part of Ron Howard's 1992 romance Far and Away, and his second being for Top Gun: Maverick in 2022. In total, the Mission Impossible franchise has a lifetime gross of well over $1 billion. The highest earner of the bunch is 2018's Fallout, which is widely considered to be the strongest entry in the franchise. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is, if the marketing is to be believed, the end of Tom Cruise's run as IMF agent Ethan Hunt. Watching the movie, it often feels like it. This franchise has always kept a very loose continuity, introducing or revising backstory in the opening minutes of each film to suit the latest story, and that's kept these nimble action movies from being weighed down. This film, by contrast, spends a remarkable amount of time looking backward at how far Ethan has come. It's a curious choice, and a potentially detrimental one. Though it's still well received, The Final Reckoning has more critical detractors than any installment in the Christopher McQuarrie era, in large part because the first third or so is heavy on expository dialogue. I've even seen words thrown around that I never would have associated with these movies, like bloated and drags. I found it hard to imagine how a Mission Impossible could drag until I saw this one for myself. I have some of the same reservations, but I also think Cruise and McQuarrie did something fascinating with their big franchise capstone. Together with this film's X Part 1, Dead Reckoning, they decided to make a mission movie about mission movies. How they're made, why they work, and what it means to make them in the age of Hollywood's IP obsession. Watch The Final Reckoning through this lens, and every bit of repetition starts to fall into place. Because I had just done my franchise rewatch before seeing Dead Reckoning the first time, I noticed something strange. I had seen almost all of it before. There are references to every previous Mission Impossible movie absolutely everywhere, from returning characters and locations to very specific character dynamics. Break down Gabriel, and you'll find he resembles each of Ethan's previous villains, as I wrote back in 2023. This pervasive repetition was, I realized, all about the Entity. Ethan's true antagonist was essentially an algorithm trained on previous mission movies, and it kept throwing his old storylines back at him. Gabriel taunted Ethan by telling him he was predictable and that his behavior made certain things inevitable. But if there's one guaranteed outcome of these films, it's that Tom Cruise always wins in the end. That's what really made Ethan the one person on Earth the entity truly feared. I assumed The Final Reckoning would trust all the legwork done in that previous movie, but instead, Cruise and McQuarrie decide to do it all again. Those first few minutes are callback after callback after callback. Just trace Ethan's journey. He breaks Paris out of prison, Ghost Protocol. He attends an ambassador's party, Mission Impossible, where he flirts with a professional thief, MI2. He ends up chained in a basement, Rogue Nation, and threatened with the torture of a loved one, MI3. He chases Gabriel through an area beneath London that echoes his pursuit of John Lark in Fallout, and when Luther is forced to defuse a nuclear bomb, Fallout again, Ethan fails to save his dear friend, Dead Reckoning. Unlike last time, The Final Reckoning makes these connections much more overtly and in much quicker succession. McQuarrie even intercuts footage from previous films whenever one is referenced directly, and the script creates many opportunities to do so. We're meant to dwell on this repetition of the past, not just notice it. Other Mission Impossible movies might lend themselves to meta readings, but not quite like The Final Reckoning does. This movie is truly about making movies, or more specifically, franchise movies. Think of the entity as algorithmic filmmaking, specifically at the blockbuster level. It can only predict using what has come before, and it makes demands on story. One of these two characters must die now. It is written. We'll come back to that. In Dead Reckoning, everyone but Ethan wanting to harness its power was a comment on where Hollywood was heading. It implied, through Cruise's resistance, that Mission Impossible stood apart from its competitors. In The Final Reckoning, the entity has run amok. Truth has been eroded. Nuclear arsenals are falling to its attacks one by one. Forget controlling it. There are people who want to follow it now. The idea that anyone would even believe they can still make use of it now looks to us like madness. This, the movie suggests, is the existential threat facing Hollywood, and it seeks to make itself seem inevitable. It's the entity's future, or none at all. Against this future stands Ethan and his ragtag IMF team. The opening key phrase from Dead Reckoning is refashioned into a mantra of sorts. We live and die in the shadows, for those we hold close and for those we never meet. These actors live and die in the shadows of movie theaters, and they do it for us, the unmet audience. I don't think it's a coincidence that this last section is repeated more than the rest. Gabriel, this movie's anti-Ethan, even throws it in his face, as if ticket buyers merit only contempt. And so Cruise, the madman who much of the world expects to die filming one of his big stunts, becomes the only sane voice in the room. Having read the reports of The Final Reckoning's filming and inflated budget, I couldn't help but notice the resemblance when Ethan was convincing a room full of irate officials wanting to shut him down that they instead needed to give him carte blanche and an aircraft carrier. And that's the bizarre magic of The Final Reckoning, which dares to try to have its cake and eat it too. The movie becomes what it wishes to fight against at first, to prove its point. Wouldn't you rather have your franchise movies be the last hour with all its Cruise, McQuarrie innovative showmanship than the algorithmic retreading of the first hour? Dead Reckoning pushes the narrative that Ethan, in his complete disregard for orders, is culpable for the collateral damage created by his decisions. The Final Reckoning takes this idea a step further and uses the movie's most surprising franchise callbacks to do it. The Rabbit's Foot, the MacGuffin of Mission Impossible 3, is a mystery no longer. To torment Ethan, Gabriel reveals that the anti-god he stole was actually the entity's original program, and that putting it in the hands of the U.S. government is what set the current state of events in motion. Therefore, Ethan is to blame for the entity. In our franchise movie reading, this is a striking change. The original Mission Impossible, way back in 1996, was Tom Cruise's first movie ever as a producer. He has leaned heavily into the world of franchise blockbusters and allowed Paramount to continue to chase mission success for 30 years. Does he feel a sense of responsibility for what the industry has become? Did he, despite his intentions, help create the IP monster? To explore this further, Final Reckoning goes back to that first movie in two key ways. The first sees Briggs, Ethan's U.S. government pursuer from Dead Reckoning, revealed as Jim Phelps Jr., son of the traitorous agent that Ethan kills in Mission Impossible's climax. This man is a living consequence of Hunt's actions, however justified, and Cruise plays the weight of his guilt in their scene together. The second brings back William Donlow, the CIA agent who suffered the consequences of Ethan's suspended break-in at Langley, arguably still the defining moment of the Mission franchise. After the theft of the knock list, Donlow was banished to an island station in the Bering Sea, where he has remained for the last 3 decades. From a certain perspective, Ethan's rogue actions ruined his life. But when the two meet face to face in the Final Reckoning's third act, Donlow has the chance to correct this narrative. Without being exiled from Langley, he never would have been truly happy at work. He never would have met his wife. If Ethan is responsible for what happened to him, then he deserves credit, not blame. Tom Cruise Ethan Hunt may be running out of missions, but his box office pull is stronger than ever. Paramount's Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning soared to a franchise-best $8.3 million in Thursday previews, outpacing Dead Reckoning Part 1, $7 million, and Fallout, $6 million. That performance puts the 8th and possibly final installment of the spy saga on track to shatter all previous Mission Impossible opening weekend records. With a projected 3-day haul expected to surpass Fallout's $61.2 million, Cruise's farewell to IMF could make up for the underwhelming domestic start of Dead Reckoning, which bowed to $54.7 million in 2023. Analysts now believe The Final Reckoning could top $70 million across the 4-day Memorial Day frame. It's a strong start for what is easily the biggest, most ambitious entry in the series, and with a massive reported production budget of $400 million before marketing, it needs every dollar. Still, insiders at Paramount note that each installment continues to boost the franchise's back catalog, with home entertainment sales for earlier MI films already spiking this week. Critically, The Final Reckoning is sitting at a solid 80% and is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes and being praised for its action, self-aware callbacks, and Cruise's unrelenting commitment to death-defying practical stunts. The underwater scene inside the Sevastopol submarine has to be seen to be believed. The 3-hour spectacle picks up 2 months after the events of Dead Reckoning, with Hunt racing against the clock to stop a rogue AI known as the Entity. It's his most pulsating and possibly final mission yet. Cruise is going out with a bang, and not a whimper, which is the most important thing for a franchise that has consistently redefined what it means to be action cinema. We'll miss Ethan Hunt, that's for sure. Collider's Ross Bonames certainly thought so. In his 8/10 review of the movie, Bonames said that the film, which he described as a fitting tribute to everything this series has been, also included one of the finest set pieces the franchise has delivered. Early on in Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, a character says of Tom Cruise Ethan Hunt that, "You never followed orders, but you never let us down." That's absolutely true of Hunt, and of what Cruise has done with this franchise over the last 30 years. As movies have become more reliant on special effects and CGI, Cruise has run full speed in the other direction, risking his life over and over again to create some of the best action films ever. He's hung onto the side of a plane while it takes off in Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation, climbed the tallest building in the world for Ghost Protocol, and piloted a helicopter for Fallout. It's almost unheard of for an A-list actor like Cruise to legitimately go as far as he has for the sake of making a thrilling film, rarely following the rules of where conventional filmmaking is going. As the title implies, The Final Reckoning certainly sets itself up like a potential goodbye to the franchise for Cruise if he wants it, even though we've had a few of those in the past as well. At almost 3 hours, The Final Reckoning is the biggest, longest, and often most ridiculous MI so far, celebrating this franchise that has continuously awed, shocked, and kept audiences on the edge of their seats. It's also bloated, over the top, even for this series, and occasionally veers away from the action for long periods in a way that seems surprising for a theoretical conclusion to a series that lives or dies by its action sequences. As The Final Reckoning reminds us through its many flashbacks, rapid-fire montages, and callbacks to the previous 7 films, this is very much a victory lap, a reminder of how truly impressive this franchise has been since the mid-90s. And while this might not be as tight and flawless as some of the best films in this series, The Final Reckoning has earned the opportunity to be celebratory about itself, to go a bit cheesy and overlong, and be a bit self-indulgent after all these years. If The Final Reckoning is, in fact, the goodbye for at least Cruise in the Mission Impossible franchise, he has proved once more that he will never let us down. Continuing 2 months after the events of Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, The Final Reckoning begins with Ethan Hunt still trying to find a way to take down the sentient AI known as the Entity, which has infiltrated the world's technology. Now armed with a key that could be the means to which he can take down the Entity, Hunt is now at the center of a quandary about how to deal with the situation, including whether he can trust his government with a power that would put them in control of the world's information. However, Hunt finds himself with only 72 hours to figure out what to do about the Entity, whether he gives in to the AI and allows the human race to become enslaved by this technology, or potentially lead to actions that could destroy all of mankind. It's easily Hunt's most important mission yet, one that all his previous actions have led to, but of course, he has his trusty team by his side. This time around, Ethan is joined by his usual crew of Luther, Ving Rhames, and Benji, Simon Pegg, as well as new IMF recruit Grace, Hayley Atwell, as well as old acquaintances and new friends. Together, they'll have to work together to save the world, but if anyone can do it, it's Ethan Hunt. Final Reckoning knows that it could very well be the finale of this series, and it certainly feels like a culmination of everything these films have done up until now. Yet, depending on the viewer, that could be a good or bad thing. On the one hand, we get moments that tie into the rest of the series in often clever ways that are a bit of fan service to those who have loved the franchise for all these years. Mysteries are explained, characters return, and ties to things from the past come to light. On the other hand, it's also a film that often prioritizes big monologues about what is happening and Ethan Hunt's importance in the world, which can be a bit too much at times. There are several discussions about how everything Ethan has done has prepared him for this mission, with examples of how that's true. For those looking for yet another action-packed IMF adventure, that's absolutely part of this story. But there are long stretches where the nostalgia takes the wheel instead. That being said, this reflection on the history of these films works. Written by Christopher McQuarrie and Erik Jendresen, who also co-write Dead Reckoning, The Final Reckoning is having a larger discussion about how our actions take us to where we need to be, how there are people all over just trying to do the right thing, and an extremely optimistic view of the future that things will work themselves out. A common refrain within the team is that they'll figure it out, even in the many times when they're faced with nuclear bombs possibly blowing up in their faces. But The Final Reckoning's viewpoint that things will work out the way they need to is strangely refreshing, especially when most action films don't attempt to make a larger statement about the state of the world. Again, these are moments that could come off as cheesy, but like Hunt's optimism, it's more contagious than it is off-putting. It's also a film that feels like it's directly speaking to Cruise's thoughts on the film industry in a very broad way. It's probably not a coincidence that Cruise, who has shown time and time again that he prefers doing his own absurd stunts instead of overly CGI'd action sequences, has put himself into a story where the world has returned to a more analog world, less reliant on technology. While this is a series that has always relied on technology for these unbelievable missions, The Final Reckoning pulls back on that entirely, allowing for an even more intense, solid thriller that relies entirely on the trust of his teammates and what Hunt is capable of. What better way for Cruise to show off what he can do one last time? Even though The Final Reckoning isn't non-stop action like some of the other installments have been, when it does focus on an action sequence, it's still truly unbelievable. As his fourth film in this series, McQuarrie knows how to heighten the tension of an action sequence, building and building until we're clawing our seats and gasping for air. It's truly a testament to this series that 8 films in, we know what Hunt can do, and we know he's likely going to walk away mostly unscathed from these scenarios, and yet these action scenes manage to remain as tense as ever. Much of the film leads to one extraordinary underwater sequence that McQuarrie does a great job of building towards. Even though much of the film is discussing what Hunt needs to do for this mission and how he'll handle it in detail, that slow, simmering tension explodes once we actually get to the moment. We also get yet another brilliant showcase for Cruise's daring and talents as an action star in the much-publicized plane sequence, which, even after all these years and remarkable action moments, ranks as one of Mission Impossible's best. It's incredible what Cruise is pulling off in these moments, and considering that, once again, this is being called the Final Reckoning, we're more nervous about whether Hunt will get out of this situation than ever. It's a phenomenal sequence that is a perfect punctuation for this iconic action series. Even though this already gargantuan cast is now even bigger, with actors like Henry Czerny, Angela Bassett, Pom Klementif, Shea Wyam, and Greg Tarzan Davis all returning, this series also adds characters played by Holt McCallany, Janet McTeer, Nick Offerman, Hannah Waddingham, Katie O'Brien, and Tremel Tillman, just to name a few. This is a packed cast list with a ton going on, and yet it never feels like it's biting off more than it can chew. Each character gets their own moment that speaks to what makes them great, and every character feels like an integral piece in the puzzle that Ethan Hunt is trying to solve. This is a 3-hour Mission Impossible that is full to the brim, but these characters earn the standout moments we get here. Unfortunately, the one character who doesn't quite fit into all of this is Esai Morales' Gabriel, who continues his villainous story from Dead Reckoning, but is largely relegated to the failed henchman of the all-encompassing entity. Considering how major the entity's threat is, Gabriel can't help but feel minor in comparison. And while Dead Reckoning hinted at a dark past between Gabriel and Ethan, The Final Reckoning never pays that off in any substantial way. In a franchise that has had truly brilliant villains like Sean Harris's Solomon Lane and Philip Seymour Hoffman's Owen Davian, not enough is done with Gabriel to make him feel like a true threat, nor can he live up to the danger that is the entity. As the presumed conclusion to at least this version of this franchise, it certainly feels that way, The Final Reckoning is stuffed, convoluted, and ludicrous at times, but it's also mostly a great send-off to this universe, a deserved celebration for everything this series has accomplished, and one final, again, seemingly showcase for Cruise as one of the greatest action stars of all time. Mission Impossible deserves to go down as one of the best action franchises to ever exist, and while this might not be the greatest mission this series has had, it's a fitting tribute to everything this series has been, and I'm grateful they accepted this mission. The Hollywood Reporter reported the beginning of principal photography of the then untitled Mission Impossible 8 filming took place in the UK at Longcross Studios and the Lake District. Other locations included Malta, South Africa, and Norway. In December 2022, filming was finished in the UK. The crew then moved to Ollier in Italy to continue filming aboard the aircraft carrier USS Djurbush during the 2023 Writer Guild of America strike. Production was thought to have been put on hold, according to an interview with McQuarrie. The June 2023 issue of the Empire magazine, however, this was later revealed. Tov Binamis' interpretation of McQuarrie's statement and continued production was only waiting for the promotion of Parta Neta to complete filming was officially suspended in July due to the 2023 SAD-FT strike. The film returned to production in March 2024, though in May it encountered a delay due to a submarine malfunction during filming in England. Cruise and Morales were observed performing stunts from an airborne biplane with crew shouldering them onto. the wings of the open cockpit aircraft, as it flew upside down while the pilot tore a green screen suit so as to be digitally removed from the final shot in July 2024. Simon Pegg revealed filming had concluded for his part, thought the cast and crew were maintaining radio silence by November 2024. Production had concluded, and the film was in post-production. The Hollywood Reporter reported that the budget had neared $400 million due to the production delays. Post-production industrial light and magic returns from the seventh film top produced the visual effects with Clear Angle Studios and Hayley Entertainment as the additional vendors for LAR cyber scanning and pre-visualization in October 2023. Dead Reckoning Part 2 was removed as the film subtitle, and the new subtitle was confirmed as The Final Reckoning in November 2024 music. Lon Bath was originally announced in May 2020 to be composing the film score after previously doings of her Mission Impossible Fallout 2080 and Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part Welzo 23. But it was later announced in April 2025 that he would be replaced with Max Arouge, and Alfie Godfrey Arouge has previously provided additional music for Dead Reckoning and served as technical score assistant on Fallout. Both Arouge and Godfrey have contributed music to numerous projects scored by BAF over the years. Cecile Tornosak was credited as the supervising music editor and score producer of Dead Reckoning release Mission Impossible. The Final Reckoning had its world premiere in Tokyo on May 5, 2025. The film screened at the 2025 Cannes Film Festival on May 14, 2025. Prior to its scheduled theatrical release on May 23rd by Paramount Pictures, it was previously set for release on August 5, 2022, but was delayed to November 4, 2022, July 7, 2023, June 28, 2024, and then to the current date in response to the 2023 SAF-FDR strike, taking the original release date of the SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants due to delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, and the 2023 Hollywood strikes. The budget for the film reportedly increased to at least $400 million, placing it among the most expensive films ever made based on typical industry expectations. The film may need to earn around $1 billion worldwide to recoup its production costs. However, in addition to its box office, its performance on Paramount streaming service Paramount Plus is also expected to be asignificant, factoring evaluating its overall success internationally. It was released theatrically in Australia, New Zealand, Philippines, India, and South Korea on May 17, 2025. Before releasing in the United Kingdom on May 21st, reception in the United States and Canada. The Final Reckoning was released alongside Lilo and Stitch and is projected to gross $80 to $110 million over the 4-day Memorial Day weekend. The film made $8 million in thrust day box office previews, a franchiser record critical response on the Review AG. Regatta website, Rotten Tomatoes, 79% of 292 critics' reviews are positive. The website's consensus reads, gargantuan in action, runtime, and scope. The Final Reckoning is a sentimental send-off for Ethan Hunt that accomplishes its mission with a characteristic flair for the impossible Metacritic, which uses a weighted average. Assigned the film a score of 67 out of 100 based on 56 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences pled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A- on an A+ to F scale, a grade lower than the previous film's A, in a mixed review for Roger.com. Brian Tallarico criticized the first hour of the film as repetitive and pretentious to the point of parody and the worst segment in the entire franchise, but praised the action sequences as enough to ignore everything wrong with the movie up to that point. Future in June 2023. McQuarrie told Fandango that Dead Reckoning and The Final Reckoning would not necessarily end these series, and they were developing ideas for future installments. In July 2023, during promotion for Dead Reckoning, crews expressed interest in continuing to make further films in these series as Ethan Hunt, despite both films having initially been billed as a send-off to the character, citing Harrison Ford playing Indiana Jones in his early 80s in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. On November 12, 2024, the journalist Jeff Sneeder reported that Cruise was looking at his Top Gun Maverick co-star Glenn Powell to replace him as the new lead. Powell denied this rumor on the Pat McAfee show in May 2025 during the world premiere for this film. Cruise told The Hollywood Reporter that this film is the last one in the franchise, adding that the film isn't called The Final Reckoning for no reason. Mission Impossible. The Final Reckoning movie review. It would be easy to point at your preferred peaks in the Mission Impossible franchise as the benchmark for what you judge each new one. by whether you dig Brian De Palma's distinctive opening entry, J.J. Abrams. Nail-biting best villain third installment, The Gonzo Heights of Brad Bird's bird-jumping fourth film, or the undeniably strong run from the Cruise-McQuarrie partnership that started back with 2015's Rogue Nation, possibly reached a high with the fantastic follow-up Fallout, and then hit something of a box office brick wall with 2023's Dead Reckoning, which was the biggest casualty of this process of successively heightened expectations. But the reality is, they've all been pretty damn amazing slices of blockbuster entertainment. In their own distinctive ways. Yes, everybody derides these conwu-hilmadentry, but it was still the highest-grossing film of the year. Something none of the other installments have achieved, and if nothing else, proved the unexpected versatility of this cruiser behemoth. So as we come to the final reckoning, it's probably best not judging it as to whether or not it's the best entry in this repeatedly, sometimes successively impossible-to-beat saga. And instead, just seeing it as a fitting finale to 30 years of ferocious filmmaking and at times insane commitment to the world of grandstanding stunts and big-screen entertainment, tirelessly championed by its star Tom Cruise. Having already obtained both parts of the fabled key, the first part of the puzzle required to stop the mysterious AI entity from its bid for global domination, and as is revealed, mass destruction of mankind. The race is on for Ethan Hunt and his MLA crew of now real operatives to find the rest of the pieces and put them all together with precise timing to abort the imminent nuclear self-destruction of the planet, raising the stakes, the highest they have. Ever beat the final reckoning at times feels like a rather sobering counterpart to its preceding frequently more fun and breezy Dead Reckoning Part 1. Intricately and densely plotted Cruise and McQuarrie haven't just doubled down on the complexity of the problem for the sheer sake of it. They've somehow managed to at times rather respectfully recount this entire saga as a build-up to this staggering final eyes. It feels occasionally cumbersome, like what they are attempting is as impossible as the franchise frequently celebrates being. But one only has to look at the disastrous attempts to do precisely this kind of reckoning in Craig's Bond run to see that here, however clumsy it sometimes feels, they have indeed worked some serious magic to pull off the impossible. The final reckoning isn't merely paying tribute to all the movies that came before it. It somehow manages to draw valuable threads from all of them together, from old players to key MacGuffins, with one truly emotional reference that works on multiple levels for not only the film's earlier characters, but actually the original TV shows. As repeatedly stated, they don't always pull it off smoothly and effortlessly, but it's that same effort that is noticeable and acknowledged as part of the experience. It's not lost on the audience that somebody has actually put some thought into how this could possibly work as one mammoth whole, one big conclusion to the entire saga. Going repeatedly full tilt into exposition, even that tactic doesn't appear too strained, allowing you to keep up with the impossibly dense plot of MacGuffin upon MacGuffin and actually buy into this crazy-ass plot. Which, let's face it, can't hold one bit of water, but within the confines of this particular universe is somehow more than enough to keep you along for the ride, hoping desperately that they can pull off this one final. Against odds, mission bristling with tension and some superb smaller encounters. Of course, what you came here for is the big set pieces, and they don't disappoint. Taking the best moments from a succession of classics from The Hunt for Red October to The Abyss, and still conjuring up something that eventually feels both original and pure extreme. Cruise, not least when it catapults him into a skyward trajectory in a bid to top the grandstanding Fallout finale, somehow coming damn close to pulling that off. There will certainly be plenty of people deriding the flaws in this mammoth epic, with criticisms likely ranging from it's between 20 minutes and 2 hours too long, it's too much of a greatest hits album, it's too referential laden, its stunts are too comparable to previous ones only done bigger, and its ultimate sign-off probably isn't as satisfying as it could have been. There's no doubt that Fallout nailed much of this second part. Heightened stakes, grandstanding finale, perfect sign-off work more effortlessly, efficiently, and frankly perfectly. But Cruise has still done the impossible for the 8th time, making a supposedly final mission which is likely never ever going to be topped, which has practical stunts and physical commitment that no other person, let alone actor, on the planet would ever even consider, which no studio in this age of VFX and ironically AI would ever even think necessary, and which all comes together for the kind of blockbuster the likes of which we may never see again on the big screen. There's something truly grand about that. And for all its flaws, this one deserves a respectful nod of resounding approval. In all, they've managed to pull off whatever 2025 summer blockbuster slate has to offer the year. Won't get bigger and certainly won't get grander than Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. For nearly 30 years, the stunts and action sequences of Mission Impossible have been synonymous with big screen spectacle. And as expected, the franchise's newest entry finds Tom Cruise's alter ego Ethan Hunt risking life, limb, and the fates of millions this time in pursuit of stopping the entity, the evil AI introduced in 2023's Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. But the way I see it, the sequel, which stopped being Dead Reckoning Part 2 sometime in the last 2 years, might be trying a little too hard to top the IMF's greatest hits. First thing you should know about me is that I've always been a huge mark for James Bond movies. I've got a lot of formative movie memories from growing up with those films. So I was frankly thrilled to see all the things I loved about Bond captured perfectly in 2016's Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation, the first of now. 4 Ethan Hunt adventures, written and directed by Christopher McQuarrie. Rogue Nation nails the combination of go for broke, practical stunts, grinning self-awareness, and just the right touch of believability that make up the most important parameters for a successful IMF mission. Fallout nails it slightly less, and I think Dead Reckoning misses by a wider margin. The Final Reckoning, unfortunately, has gone farther afield. My biggest takeaway from the 8th and very evidently not final film starring Cruise as Fate's chosen lucky boy is that it's extremely sober. The Final Reckoning veers into melodrama whenever there is story to be told. The cast, which is an assembling of familiar franchise faces, and newcomer cameos talk their way through soap opera levels of tension. Nearly every scrap of dialogue is invested in no less than the end of all life on the planet. But my first litmus test for these movies is how serious they treat Ethan Hunt getting the mission. Rogue Nation was a flirty encounter at a record shop. Fallout's knock on the door woke him up from a dream where a nuclear blast interrupted his wedding. And Dead Reckoning was some kind of dramatic poetry slam with the IMF oath and a new recruit. The Final Reckoning features a low FI delivery method thanks to the entity's infiltration of all things digital, and it's honestly kind of fun. But the essage is the most dire and serious thing. This is a story point introduced by Dead Reckoning. The entity as a villain capable of literally every bad thing imaginable, like a laundry list of vague shorthand threats, any one of which could have been enough to carry a movie. Instead, they've all been lumped together in the form of a nebulous digital boogeyman, and reiterating that in the "this message will self-destruct" section of the movie sets a very somber tone for everything that follows. Save for a few bits of humor here and there, it's never shaken absurdly astronomical stakes are one of the biggest issues with the Final Reckoning. A good old-fashioned nuke or biological weapon, those live in Mission Impossible sweet spot life and death at a massive scale, while also real enough to be relatably scary. But all life on planet Earth is just too much to plausibly wrap your head around, particularly with how seriously everyone takes everything else, compared to, say, Rogue Nation or Fallout. I know I keep swerving away from the Final Reckoning and back into the rest of the franchise, but for better and worse, this is a Part 8 that's very aware that it's a Part 8. You can't call a movie The Final Reckoning without delivering some degree of well-finality, and oh boy does this one try. It's not merely planting Easter eggs from the earlier films, so much as picking entire story points, largely unnecessary ones. I would argue it's a nice nod to the diehards, but when you consider the nearly 3-hour runtime and the relative lack of importance these moments have to the overall movie. I'm not sure what McQuarrie and Cruise were trying to accomplish. This is all to say the final reckoning is impossible to review out of the context of the other 7 Missions Impossible, which is why I keep recapping my feelings for the franchise as a whole. One of the callbacks that I really did enjoy, though, is a guy we've seen in the trailers for the final reckoning, William Donlove Saxon. The poor bastard working in the CIA Black Vault, whose nose Ethan stole the no-CC list out from underway back in the 90s. His part in the final reckoning is spottin'. He's a meaningful character for Ethan and the IMF to encounter, who also speaks to the themes of the movie. Our lives are the sum of our choices. His fun, which is short supply here. And I would have loved it if he'd have been the only bit of reckoning this movie tried to do. But I've been talking a lot about the things I didn't like. It's important to note that there are some things the final reckoning very much did right. The action is predictably excellent, with the highlight being Ethan's infiltration of the Sevastopol, the MacGuffin of a submarine that sank at the start of Dead Reckoning. It is incredibly tense and intricate and claustrophobic and all the other nail-biting things you want from a thriller. More than that, there's clearly a huge chunk of the reported $400 million budget on screen, and Christopher McQuarrie is getting all the nautical miles he can out of it. The set is equal parts Avatar and the hallway fight from Inception. The fight choreography is also elevated from previous entries as other countries send their most special forces after the same prize. Ethan is after the fights are a little more brutal and legitimately feel like the IMF could lose at this point in the franchise. That's a difficult tie trope to walk, and McQuarrie and Cruise deserve a lot of credit for that. They also deserve a fair bit of credit bringing the team together again. It felt that was one part of the Mission Impossible formula that was a little absent from the last film. The climax of the final reckoning gives every team member a job. It's reminiscent of Fallout in that respect, and very important for the IMF because it's less fun when Ethan is running around doing everything himself and abiding trusting his team is part of Ethan's allure, in addition to being, as Shams Jasper Briggs puts it in Dead Reckoning, a mind-reading, shape-shifting incarnation of chaos. The climactic biplane sequence is great, to its thrilling in parts, funny in other, and most importantly, all the effort and planning that goes into a stunt like that is apparent. The only question I have about it is, would the final reckoning be worse if it were a stunt double walking out on the wing of that plane instead of Tom Cruise, or would it just have one less interesting thing going for it? A lot of how I feel about this movie, though, comes down to that subtitle. The final reckoning can't be officially final with the way it ends, and I don't think there are any of us who believe Tom Cruise is done risking his life for our entertainment. So it's either the best subtitle for this movie or the worst. Maybe they completely missed the mark on the final part of the equation, and it's not a representative title at all. Maybe it's not entirely successful attempt at tying a neat and all-encompassing bow is the final reckoning for the GIA. It laid out across 8 movies from a real-world perspective, maybe a messy and self-serious capstone to an otherwise iconic franchise is exactly what they deserve, and it's a perfect subtitle for my part, because again, I'm a big fan of this kind of movie I'm rooting for. The latter threads have been picked up and tugged on in different directions throughout the course of these 8 films. That's just the cost of doing business with a 30-year juggernaut of a franchise. Their mission now, should they choose to accept, is to take the clean slate they've created with all those threads tied up, however clumsily, and get back to what Mission Impossible does. Best not take itself so seriously. Other information about this film, here it is. The 8th and final film in the spectacular Mission Impossible action thriller franchise, which manifests itself like the last segment jettisoned from some impossibly futurist Apollo spacecraft, which then carries on ionospherically upwards in a fireball as Tom Cruise ascends to a state beyond stardom, beyond IP, and with this film's anti-AI and internet skeptic message and the gobsmacking final aerial set piece. Cruise is repeating his demand for the ECT big screen experience. He is, of course, doing his own superhuman stunts for the same reason as he himself once memorably put it that Gene Kelly did all his own dancing. Final Reckoning is a new and ultimate challenge which takes Cruise's buff and resourceful IMF leader Ethan Hunt in one last maverick deniable mission to exasperate, and yet overall his stuffed shirt superiors at Washington and Langley, and what might that be to save the world, of course, like all the other missions with his dowdy team, including Grace Hayley, Atwell, Luther Ving Rhames, and Benji Simon Pegg Hunt, must now confront an Anister and metastasizing AI brain called the Entity, the ultimate MacGuffin B-Daddy, which is undermining truth all over the world with lies and deepfake setting. Nation against nation, nuclear power against nuclear power, so that it will be the anti-God, the evil ruler of all, and to stop it. Ethan has to take the low-tech cruciform key he salvaged in the last film and apply it to the pod cover device, which is on board a wrecked Russian sub, the Sevastopol, somewhere on the seabed. Wait, should they actually have called in James Cameron in some sort of nifty submersible? The combination of the two will be a poison pill which will destroy the entity. It is a wildly silly, wildly entertaining adventure, which periodically gives us a greatest hits flashback montage of the other 7 films in the MI canon, but we still get a brand new box fresh Tom sprinting along the street scene, without which it wouldn't be MI. Moreover, this 8th film gives us a terrific new character, U.S. Sub-Commander Captain Bledsoe, played with suavity and the tiniest hint of camp by Trammell Tillman, who has the chops for MI9 whenever that happens. And just as it wouldn't be MI without a sprinting scene, it wouldn't be MI without Tom. Hanging on for dear life at some unfeasible altitude, here he gets to cling to the wing of an old-fashioned prop plane in the Blue Empire. As Anthony Hopkins put it way back in MI2, it's not mission difficult to Sidus at this point that I realize that Tom Cruise isn't exactly Gene Kelly so much a superhuman action hero Harold Lloyd hanging from the clock in safety last in 1923, dangling from the minute hand, preventing it from mounting towards 12, defying gravity and holding back time. That is what Cruise has done for every young forever. Fit never saying die in the face of this preposterous Armageddon clock. What a rush leading into one of the best scenes in Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt turns a wheel on a submarine, and the aspect ratio of the film expands from widescreen to fill the IMAX screen. It's a wonderfully clever beat after all. Tom Cruise is credited with saving the movie-going experience with Top Gun Maverick, so it makes sense that even in character, he's controlling the image around him. Sadly, it's one of the few clever beats in Final Reckoning, a movie that forgets so much of what makes this franchise memorable in an unwieldy and truly clunky first hour that plays like the longest previously on you've ever seen, repetitive and pretentious to the point of parody. It's the worst segment in the entire franchise that the film recovers as much as it does. Might be the most impressive mission that Ethan Hunt has ever proven possible, to be fair. If anyone has earned valorization in the action franchise sphere, it's Hunt. And so the first act serves not only to remind people of where we left these characters in 2023's Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, but to underline the importance of this character in the last 3 decades of genre film. Director Christopher McQuarrie, who co-wrote with Erik Jendresen, treats Final Reckoning like the endgame of this series from the very beginning, recapping not only the last film, but all 7 previous outings, turning Hunt into a mythical figure more than ever before. Ethan Hunt isn't a superhero. He's the guy who gets the job done, the one who chooses to accept the assignment, and the mythologizing right from jump in Final Reckoning feels a bit overcooked. Even if we all agree that Hunt crews have earned this victory lap, did they have to take 12 of them? Then films have so commonly opened with explosive sequences in their first acts, from blowing up the Kremlin to hanging from a plane to even the fun infiltration of the last chapter, that it's truly impactful to not have that sense of a runaway train building steam to start this one. It's stuck at the station for an incredibly long time as it's waiting to get going. Hunt is in hiding, brought back in by President Sloan to stop the impending doom that is the Entity, a rogue AI that now threatens the entire world with nuclear annihilation. All of the players from the Last film, we're back, including Hunt's allies Luther, Benji, and Grace, joined this time by Paris. And quickly enough, Desisai Morales resurfaces as the villain, Gabriel, a human standing for the AI villain of the Reckoning films, and a cadre of familiar faces pop up to reach over whether or not Ethan will save the day, including Janet McTar, Halt McCallan, Nick Offerman. Proving the reach of Apple TV's original programming hits Ted Lasso as Hannah Waddingham, works in an effective supporting role as an admiral on an aircraft carrier, and Severance as Trammell Tillman is fantastic in a fun part as a submarine commander. It's a big cast for what is essentially a narratively simple movie, especially at 170 minutes. Ethan Hunt and his mystery machine of allies need to stop Gabrielle and the entity from destroying mankind at the relatively shallow plotting allows for McQuarrie and Jendresen to fill in with two things way too much planning. And eventually, some truly spectacular action sequences, although I would argue that the previous films had a much stronger sense of humor that could count as a third thing missing from this entry. One of the joys of this series has been a sort of, can you believe we're doing this aesthetic as they push the last movie star to greater extremes just to satisfy a ticket-buying audience, in between dropping Tom Cruise out of planes and hurling him off cliffs. There was a cheeky wink to the audience. We know this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. But just make sure to keep your hands inside the car as the roller coaster picks up speed while we put your favorite star in mortal jeopardy by taking itself so seriously. Final Reckoning loses the cheeky ingredient in the recipe. It's less fun. And that's truly disappointing for a series that has given us some of the most exhilarating set pieces in action history. Of course, McQuarrie and Cruise aren't going to fumble the ball once the action game plan in motion. Without spoiling, the two best extended sequences here take place deep underwater and high in the air. It's as if Cruise and his team of brilliant stunt choreographers ran out of ideas on dry land, especially in IMAX. The action in Final Reckoning can be truly breathtaking. A hybrid of Ian Fleming and Buster Keaton action choreography that somehow frames its hero as the bravest man on Earth, and also sometimes just the stubbornest when Hunt is climbing around an airborne plane. You can feel the gravity pulling him to Earth and the wind pushing against him. It's enough to ignore everything wrong with the movie up to that point, and especially in an era of rampantly soulless CGI. I wouldn't begrudge anyone for dismissing the valleys of this movie just to embrace the undeniable peaks. It would be easier. For me, an unabashedly huge fan of the franchise on this very site, to do the same. If it weren't so easy to see how those valleys were formed and how easily they could have been avoided. It's clear that Cruise and McQuarrie came into this project with a desire to make the biggest film in the franchise. The runtime and franchise recapping reflect that. And it's also worth noting that it was once called Dead Reckoning Part 2, and so that aggressive seriousness that drains the first hour of this film can be partially blamed on it really being the middle hour of a 5-hour experience. However, all of that throat clearing and feelizing actually makes Final Reckoning feel less confident, not more. We don't need to be told how important Tom Cruise is to moviegoing to enjoy his final mission. After all, he turns the wheel. More detail, we've gotten to the final in one of the greatest secret agent action franchises of all time. The Mission Impossible films have slowly morphed since their 1996 first installment, this one being the pinnacle of a breathless stunt parade that's at least more fun to watch than the last. Then Hunt is still in the midst of shutting down the entity and endlessly powerful AI that's been fooling the world with misinformation, leading to understand the rise of a group that believes in the eradication of the human race. Though he's collected a career's worth of rogue missions, Hunt has the unwavering trust of the former director of the CIA and now President of the United States, Erica Sloan, Angela Bassett, who has asked him to assist her government in seizing and stopping the evil AI with shreds of his former teams. And a collection of former foes. Hunt and his IMF remnants set off on a global festival of missions to capture and poison the entity, removing it from global servers, and thus saving the world the story of an omniscient AI with convenient powers and even more convenient ways to stop it as flimsy as it was in Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. But this time it's better used as a vessel to get Ethan, doing impossible things from pole to pole, from heights to depths. A franchise that used to be Eisenbach's for visionary directors became the cruisin' McQuarrie stunt tower for better and for worse beauty of venison. Almost 3-hour journey through the limits of the planet. This installment also takes us through the franchise's previous movies and seemingly through others that never were. Far beyond the cold open. Catch up. The Final Reckoning is full of references to the previous films, which begets more character reveals and check-ins, some of which let Ethan off the hook for his previous collateral damage, and some which retcon his previous successes to render him blameworthy. Sure, I cheered for a reference to the rabbit's foot briefly before remembering that the current villain has nothing on Owen Davian, though final is in the title. This movie does not commit to being a grand ending, but it does take things back to the beginning for references, changes, and swan songs for as many characters as it can, and almost none of it pays off the DM. Finale fever of Dead Reckoning has not dissipated, which has this movie chucking so much at the wall that barely changes the stakes further. The omniscience of the entity and its mind meld with Ethan undermines the stakes of his action in a way that functions as an Infinity Stones plot with higher percentages of success, without spoiling larger reveals. Names and nods from those who'd have reason to question Hunt would seem to matter, but they don't, and if anything, don't entirely make sense in the great story the movie is telling. What's perhaps worse is that other egregious retcons are mostly abandoned, instead of leaned on for a thrilling conclusion. The Bologna about Hunt and his women mostly set aside, save for some glances at Grace. The bit about Hunt as a murderer, and the IMF recruiting former criminals in exchange for their freedom, mostly meaningless, save for a way to give something to Grace as the former thief turned IMF agent, and the boring, mostly pointless Big Bad in Gabriel. Your guess at his relevance is as good as mine, but I guess having him as the closest thing to a human villain for Ethan to fight within a movie about a rogue AI is his only purpose. It's frustrating since so much off the last movie's reckoning was an egregious stain on Hunt's history, which ends up having no payoff, but it's simultaneously refreshing that instead of more of it, the movie mostly sets it aside in favor of what were really there, for high-stakes action, and the action never stops in this heart-pounding blast through all of the world's resources. Ethan Hash hung from plane strains and automobiles, and now he's being plunged to the darkest depths of the sea with a fancy pressure suit. This film seems to break free of the traditional 3-act structure to craft a back-to-back mission collection that functions as an exposition speedrun through Hunt's greatest abilities. Hunt has almost no character journey. It feels like the warhorse blasting his way through missions, ensembles, and action sequences. Scenes have more character, reveals, and cameos than Oppenheimer. There's almost no room to breathe, as even plotting sequences are interplaced with other scenes and dynamic camera moves, which is surprisingly restrained when you consider the movie's length and how draining long conversations might be. And as Ethan makes his way through his stunts, he seems to bop through other movies like If a Highly Trained Super Agent Ended Up with the Satellite Dish from Stay Tuned. Hunt finds himself blurring the line between himself and Maverick when he's begging for permission to board an aircraft carrier. He seems to dance with a Tom Clancy flick when asking the president for difference. And most magical of all, he seems to land in the vintage James Cameron installment that never was when he ends up in a dripping ship populated by a MLI underwater crew. I can only speculate as to the reasoning behind changing this film's title from Dead Reckoning Part 2 to The Final Reckoning, but my headcanon suspicion is that it came from a place of distancing itself from the previous film setups. The MI purist in me is conflicted between being happy that the film didn't revel in its strange retcons, but she also laments that they were added for seemingly no real reason. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is wise for having mostly abandoned the flimsy setups of its predecessor and instead creating the ultimate collection of some of the best heart-pounding action. Sequences of the entire franchise time catches up with all of us, even Tom Cruise. Despite how much he seems to try to run from it in all of his movies. As much as people love to make jokes about how he has mastered some secret Scientology power of the fountain of youth, Cruise is a human being like any of us, and there's only so much longer his body turning 63 this year can endure. It is a testament to his durability and skill set that he has kept the art of spectacle going in grand fashion for modern moviegoers. For that reason, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, the newest and supposedly last installment in this franchise, assuming nobody has their fingers crossed behind their backs, is worth watching, despite the slog of a narrative that takes forever to get there. This approach isn't uncommon in the franchise. By Cruise and writer-director Christopher McQuarrie's admission, the movies are built around creating stunts for Cruise to perform, and everything else is improvised as they go. The negative effects of this approach are apparent in The Final Reckoning, because for every riveting action scene, there is a marathon of filmmakers spinning their wheels, trying to convince people how this movie's events are elaborately connected to the previous entries. A recurring critique you will undoubtedly hear about this movie is the exposition-heavy first hour, where Ethan Hunt and his ragtag team, the tech expert Benji, the computer specialist Luther, and new love interest Grace, and a lovingly badass new heroine in the crew, Paris, endlessly discuss what previously happened, what's currently happening, and hypothesize at least 3 different scenarios that could occur with the next steps in their plan. Each movie deals with end-of-the-world stakes, but this time around with the threat of an advanced artificial intelligence called the entity that's controlling global information networks. My oh my, do they treat it with dead seriousness. Accompanying these conversations is an endless parade of recycled footage from the previous movies. So much so that the late great schlockmaster Roger Corman must be smelling in heaven. The Mission Impossible series has never been extravagant with character depth, but it at least knew to keep things lighthearted with enjoyment, bravado, and the right amount of humor. To be fair, some welcome cast additions provide the movie with an presence, but the surprise of these actors is best left unspoiled. The Final Reckoning at times feels like a funeral. Most of the conversations consist of doom and gloom about the end of life, as we know it, and it drags the mood to a screeching halt. As you're looking for any kind of enjoyment, I've never dreamt of seeing Ethan Hunt infiltrate a wacky Bond villain lair so badly. Sadly, we're stuck with Gabriel Isai Morales, whose name may symbolize a hero of God, but his character reeks of a bland villain of the month. The real villain is AIA, stand-in for the introspective view of the current pop culture landscape that the Mission Impossible franchise pointedly directs its criticism toward. The previous film, Dead Reckoning 2023, fortuitously came out during the actors-writers strike against the use of AI in the industry. And The Final Reckoning continues with this digital threat that threatens to upend civilization. Most curiously, the entity, as Ethan Hunt says, wants sus divided curious, because the movie has no hesitation in referencing the U.S. political climate with references to George H.W. Bush, and most pointedly a peace-seeking Madam President who calls to mind a hypothetical world where Kamala Harris is the puss, considering how the Mission Impossible movies are the kind that take full advantage of international locations. It cannot be understated how this movie sets its critical sights on the Trump administration and its 100% tariffs against foreign films. That commentary isn't exactly sophisticated, though it is well-intentioned. But the real ingenuity of this movie is the payoff audiences will get once Cruise does what he does best. The action extravaganza in this movie consists of a prolonged retrieval sequence in a sunken submarine, which exemplifies hold your breath, tension to the highest order. Then, of course, there's the big money moment that's all over the promotion of Ethan, maneuvering for dear life at top, a biplane without hyperbole. It is truly one of those feats you must see to believe. There's a sense of awareness in The Final Reckoning that is simultaneously a blessing and its undoing. McQuarrie and Cruise's indictment of AI being insignificant to human-made wonder is important, but one too many winks at their series, some of which are blatant reckons. Slow the movie down. Cruise is an undeniable movie star in every sense of the term, but he may not be that for much longer. In that case, this movie should be final, in every sense of the word. Extra information. Has the fuse finally been unlit after 30 years of saving the world with stunts, set pieces, spycraft and a substantial amount of sprinting is Tom Cruise's possibility, defying IMF agent Ethan Hunt, finally hanging up his prosthetic mask. Whether or not Final Reckoning is truly the final mission, impossible remains to be seen, but there is a sense of an ending here, a much-deserved victory lap for this most consistently thrilling off-franchise's itis to some extent Mission Impossible, the greatest hits. It opens with a valedictorian montage of all 7 previous films, makes a nice narrative link to Mission Impossible 3, and even offers a scene which plays out like the Seinfeld finale. Ethan's lifetime of crimes and misdemeanor put on trial. Lessenalist William Donlow, a meaner character from the first film, makes a welcome return here too. The resolution of an arc established in 1996 with the line of dialogue, "I want him manning a radar tower in Alaska by the end of the day," as much as it nods to the series as a whole. However, this is first and foremost a direct sequel to 2023's Dead Reckoning, which first established the sentient AI a whole, the entity as the ultimate cyber baddie. Writer-director Christopher McQuarrie, the series' longest-serving steward, ups the ante here in terms of bold narrative ambition. Picking up months later, the world has now irrevocably changed. Governments have collapsed, nuclear arsenals have been compromised, societal order has crumbled, and only one man can save us, where the earlier films felt like tightly wound. Ground-level espionage thrills. This is storytelling on a vast scale. It is essentially a war film and a Cold War-era one at that, with the entity forcing superpowers into military brinkmanship and CIA head-turned President Erik Sloan forced into sweaty, unthinkable choices. The trolley problem on a global scale. It sets the grandest, most apocalyptic stakes in a mission film, yet with nothing less than the total annihilation of humankind on the table from a less capable filmmaker that could feel silly or over the top. And though the opening act of this lengthy film, a touch under 3 hours, initially creaks under the weight of its setup and exposition, you always feel in safe hands. Tense, dense, and stressful. It's hardly the feel-good hit of the summer, but it speaks to McQuarrie's fascinations across his now 4 mission films. His ability to paint on both a colossal canvas and an intimate character won our lives, as Henry Czerny's Kittredge says in the first film, and as Ving Rhames' Luther. Repeats in this one are the sum of war choices, and much of Final Reckoning is about understanding Hunt's choices across his life. All apparently culminating here, he's dedicated to saving the world at whatever cost, yes, but he's also dedicated to his friends, to his decency. That focus means that unusually this is a mission film which is largely action-like, at least in its first half. There are really only 2 major set pieces. Thankfully, they are among the best Mission has ever managed. The first is a true nail-biter and nerve-shredder in which Ethan makes a daring, potentially deadly ocean dive to retrieve the entity's source code from a sunken 2001 A Space Odyssey or Inception. In its disorientating brilliance, its potent application of production design, and the final showdown in which all the chess pieces finally converge, sees Ethan engage in a jaw-dropping battle in the skies, cruise-hopping casually between 2 biplanes with some of the maddest, most astonishing stunts he has ever achieved. Your jaw will detach and your palms will leak sweat. However you feel about the star, his commitment to spectacle and showmanship remains extraordinary. Old enough to qualify for a pensioner's bus pass, he has never been more game and is still running relentlessly, even when there are ample public transport options available nearby. Running like his life depends on it. Running like cinema depends on it. He is the effective, self-appointed UN ambassador to the movies, the last true movie star. If this is indeed his final mission, it's quite the appropriate swan song, but let's hope the door will stay open should he once again choose to. Except when the first Mission Impossible movie was released in 1996, it had been 30 years since the espionage series by that name debuted on American television. It's doubtful that the makers of that first installment of A-listers, composed of director Brian De Palma's, screenwriters Robert Towne and David Keane, executive producer and behind-the-scenes auteur Tom Cruise, a dandy idea that the franchise they were creating would run continuously for nearly 30 more years, cycling through different directors and writers, while Cruise's indestructible super spy Ethan Hunt persisted through countless explosions. vehicle chases, halo jumps, underwater water vault heists, and the apparently harness-free scaling of everything from sheer rock cliff faces to the tallest skyscraper in the world. This summer, the franchise turns 29. Cruise turned 63, and if you believe the movie's subtitle and its press hype, Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, at last puts an end to the series' 8-movie, 5-director, 1-star run through the early 21st ST century. Onslaught of remakes and reboots and prequels and spin-offs, the My series, directed and co-written from the 5th film onward by Christopher McQuarrie, has clung to the quaint old Hollywood precept that when audiences keep returning to a series, it's not for the brand name but for the star. It's impossible to imagine this cheerfully ludicrous franchise holding together to whatever extent it does without Cruise at its center, his scary degree of commitment, the same quality that makes his off-screen persona so peculiar and at times off-putting, has become the most unifying through line of the MI films. Is he at long last getting too old for this? That question is brought up by several characters over the course of The Final Reckoning, but Ethan himself is never one of them. His too focused on his latest objective, retrieving a world-saving hard drive from a sunken Russian submarine in Arctic waters, to fret about details like his age, his physical safety, or whether he's wearing anything but a pair of briefs as he whims his way up from the wreck to the icy surface. The valedictory tune of this last chapter is evident in the multiple montages of franchise highlights that recur in its first hour. These are edited too or rapidly to provide much contextual background. They're little more than YouTube-style supercuts made up of glimpses of the famous faces that have graced past installments: John Voight, Vanessa Redgrave, Philip Seymour Hoffman, interspersed with micro-flashbacks to memorable stunts and shots of Cruise running, always running his back, hands stiffly slicing the air in that particular cruising fashion against every exotic backdrop imaginable. These inserts are pure fan service, but they establish a mood of tongue-in-cheek nostalgia that helps Final Reckoning's 170-minute runtime feel as sonorous the world of Mission Impossible with its self-destructing instruction tapes and mask reveals is. Extremely silly in the series, frank enjoyment of that fact is part of the fun as far as catch up on the actual story. Angela Bassett, who in this movie's enviable alternate universe is the steely, sexy U.S. president, is there to help you out with what's gone on since the end of the prior movie. A malevolent artificial intelligence, known as the Entity, having previously achieved sentience and infiltrated the internet, is now bent in seizing control of the world's nuclear weapon stockpiles, owes to eradicate all of humanity. The Entity has also become an objective cult, worship for a portion of the Earth's population who for some reason crave their own destruction. The extreme version, I guess, of voting against one's interests, since a faceless and voiceless cyber-villain is hard to conceptualize, much less chased through a mine shaft. Also returning from the previous installment is Morales, Gabriel, a suave cipher whose relationship to the evil AI remains puzzling. Has Gabriel been brainwashed by the Entity into devoting his life to functioning as its embodied human representative? Or is he attempting to harness for himself the technology that one character describes as a truth-eating digital parasite, regardless in order to stop the Entity? Ethan needs access to its source code, which is on the aforementioned hard drive in that sunken submarine, to help retrieve it. He teams up with his longtime allies, tech genius Luther and comms guy and all-around mensch Benji Simon Pegg, as well as world-class pickpocket-turned-love interest Grace, nemesis-turned-ally Paris, and newcomer Dagus, who still seems to be figuring out his role in the group. En route to the Arctic, they hitch a ride on a submarine whose at first suspicious, then supportive crew includes Severance's Trammell Tillman and Love Lies Bleeding's Katie O'Brien. Once the all-important thingamabob has been secured in a spectacular underwater set piece whose attention to the inexorable laws of physics reminded me of the sinking ship in Titanic, it's off to a secret underground facility in South Africa where the Entity's takeover of the global information system can at last be reversed. The action culminates in the jaw-dropping sequence teased in the trailer, an extended aerial chase that involves crews first clinging to the yacht outside of one World War II-era biplane as it takes off, then leaping from that one to a second biplane being flown by the Entity's loyal henchman Gabriel. Whatever the much-repeated words Tom Cruise does his own stunts mean exactly, and they often mean more than you might think. Sequences like the biplane battle are testimonials to the power of analog. Filmmaking, when it comes to engaging an audience in the stakes of a story. Cruise really is out there, clinging to the side of that plane as it swoops and dips over a non-green screen landscape of cliffs and canyons. A real thing is happening in a real place. Real risks have been taken, real craft and skill deployed, and a gobsmacking quantity of real money spent in order to accomplish the oddly humble goal of entertaining an audience. If you've never seen a Mission Impossible movie, Final Reckoning will not be the one to win you over to the franchise's loopy appeal. It's too long, too self-referential, too dependent on the viewer's affection for characters who were better developed in earlier installments, but whether or not this one is really the last in these re's. Final Reckoning is a noble exemplar of a dying breed, the big, dumb, fun-action blockbuster with a bona fide movie star at its center putting it all on the line and hanging on for dear life just to keep you at the edge of our theater seats. This film, directed by Christopher McQuarrie, written by Christopher McQuarrie, Erik Jendresen, produced by Tom Cruise. Christopher McQuarrie, starring Tom Cruise, Hayley Atwell, Ving, Rhames, Simon Penry, Czerny, Angela Bassett. Cinematography, Fraser Tage, directed by Eddie Hamilton. Music by Maxo Alfie. Godfrey Production Companies, Paramount Pictures. Skydance TC Productions, distributed by Paramount Pictures. Release dates: May 5th, 2025 in Tokyo, May 23rd, 2025 in United States. Running time 170 minutes. Country: United States. Language: English. Budget: $300 to $400 million. Box office: $14.2 million. So guys, this is the review of Mission Impossible, the Final Reckoning movie, and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe West Films to our channel. Thanks for watching.